Okay, so before we get started, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please make sure that you enter them into the chat box. That way, at the end of the presentation, once you get to see my face and I get to see all of your wonderful questions, I'll be able to answer everything without anything falling through the cracks. So if you have any questions come up, please go ahead and use the chat box for that. Welcome to your gluten-free pregnancy. I am Christy Denoy, and in just a moment, we are going to I am going to introduce myself, and then we're going to just dive into some awesome nutrition knowledge. We're going to nerd out just a little bit today, so I hope you're okay with that. Okay, so let's get to know me just a little bit. I'm so excited to be here at the Nourish Festival. And I'm so excited that you're here at the Nourish Festival, and I can't wait to get to know you guys towards the end as well. But here's just a little bit about me. My name is Christy Denoy. I am a wife to Mike. Mike is a teacher. He teaches environmental science and loves it. He is very into regenerative agriculture and growing our food, which goes very, very well with me, a holistic nutritionist, because I am very into what we put into our bodies and how we eat our foods and prepare them. I am also a girl mom. I am a mom to an 11-year-old who is very into school, a 2-year-old who's into everything, and we have one more little girl on the way. We're due in February. So this is an extremely timely presentation for me to give because I'm in the throes of it myself. I'm 20 weeks pregnant. I'm also a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, which is a very long title to just basically mean I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I'm going to approach everything from a functional foundational standpoint. So I'm going to look at root causes, and we're going to try and get to the bottom of things that way. Again, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box so that I can see them at the end of the presentation. That's me. Now you can see my pretty face. This is me last year, actually, at the Nourish Festival in Dallas. It happened almost a year ago, a couple weeks past a year ago. And I was official press last year, and it was so much fun. I had a blast the entire weekend. And this year, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be presenting at the online Nourish Festival. I was so bummed when COVID-19, for multiple reasons, I think we all have been bummed by COVID-19. But the quarantine, I was afraid was going to take away the Nourish Festival. And I absolutely loved connecting with other gluten-free brands and other gluten-free parents and people and exchanging tips and tricks. So I'm so excited that they have provided this online festival for us this year. What do I do as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner? Well, I work with moms specifically. I work with mamas-to-be, whether they are trying to conceive or they are pregnant, mamas who just became, so immediate postpartum mamas, and those who are in the trenches and stressed out and tired. Usually these are moms of school-age children or younger. Together, we work to achieve calm in the chaos through food as medicine, lifestyle, and mindset. So calm in the chaos is always my goal. Motherhood can be chaotic, but I can help you find some calm in it. So food as medicine is going to deal with nutrient-dense, properly prepared whole foods that your diet is comprised of. And then there are 6 foundations that we'll be talking about today as well. Lifestyle is going to include movement that feels good for your body, no high-intensity interval training if your body tells you no, and also non-toxic swaps in terms of household products, whether that's personal care or cleaning products. And then mindset, we're going to talk about perspective shifts, mantras, and affirmations, which I know some people tend to think sounds a little woo-woo, but really they're just things to help redirect your thinking. So you're going to get a couple of those today from me as well. Sometimes working with people as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner means that I'm working one-on-one giving nutritional therapy, but sometimes it means that I'm giving talks like this one or the one that you are currently attending. I absolutely love doing this work, and it completely lights me up. And again, I know I've said it before, but I just have to say, I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited to share this information with you. Okay, so the learning outcomes for today's talk, your gluten-free pregnancy. Let's talk through what you can expect to learn by the end of this presentation. And again, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box so that I can get to them right at the end. Today's learning outcomes, you can expect to learn what pregnancy expectations are both from the FDA and from me, and we'll kind of talk through why I don't necessarily agree with all of the FDA recommendations. We'll also talk about things that you may have heard about being gluten-free in pregnancy. We'll talk about the problems, the standard nutritional deficiencies that can occur in a gluten-free pregnancy, and the importance of nutrition within a gluten-free pregnancy. We're also going to talk about those foundations I mentioned earlier of nutrition and how those relate specifically to your pregnancy. We will talk about some solid nutrient-dense food choices for you and your little one. We'll talk about sourcing, we'll talk about storing, and then we'll troubleshoot some pregnancy complications that are relatively common to pregnancy. Okay, you guys ready? I'm so ready. Here's part one, the problems with a gluten-free diet and current FDA pregnancy nutrition guidelines. So you'll see that problems is in quotation marks. This is going to actually talk about real documented nutritional deficiencies that gluten-free diets often have. However, as we continue into the presentation, you'll understand why I have quotation marks around them. Some claims you may have heard about the quote-unquote problems of gluten-free pregnancy that are unfounded from the regular Joe on the street or your mother-in-law or your sister or your best friend's cousin. That if you don't eat gluten, the baby isn't going to get enough fiber. Or if you don't eat gluten, you can't have a healthy pregnancy because they assume you're not eating grains. Or that constipation is such an issue in pregnancy anyway, you're going to be miserable without the fiber you would find from gluten-containing breads and cereals. Also, you could have heard questions about nutrients specifically, such as, how will you get your folic acid, which we will talk about in depth? What about B vitamins? And cereal is a great source of iron. How will you get yours? We're going to talk about iron for a little bit of time in this as well. There are actually two different forms of iron, and we'll talk about why these quote-unquote problems, these claims that you may have heard, are not actually an issue. Okay, now these are things that are documented as actual issues in gluten-free diets. So, according to Beyond Celiac, who I believe is also here at the Nourish Festival, gluten-free diets are, quote, often found to be low in calcium, iron, fiber, zinc, B vitamins, vitamin D, and magnesium. While that is true, if you are not properly honing in your nutrition, here are some of the issues I have with this, and here's why it doesn't concern me so much. The first of which is that most of us here in the United States of America, regardless of whether or not we're eating gluten, are low in vitamin D. And we are going to talk about vitamin D later on in this presentation as well. Also, when it comes to the iron question, in addition to what I've already said about iron, and in pre-addition, if you will, to what I will say later about iron, iron deficient anemia in pregnancy often occurs regardless of gluten intake, because of the increased blood flow required and the lack of taking it into your diet to replace that increased need. So you may or may not know that in pregnancy, your blood flow actually increases 50%, which is crazy. So your iron needs also increase. Now we're moving on to the FDA recommendations for pregnancy nutrition, prenatal nutrition. The FDA, this is all copy and pasted from the FDA website, okay? So the FDA recommends that you get a variety of vegetables from all of what it calls subgroups. And it calls those subgroups dark green. So that's going to be your broccoli, your leafy green vegetables, red and orange. So we're looking at bell peppers, oranges, sweet potatoes, legumes, which are beans and peas, starchy vegetables. So I mean, there's a little bit of overlap here too, right? So this would be like your potatoes, squashes, things like that, and Other's going to be things like fungi, so mushrooms, things like that. They also recommend that you get lots of fruits, especially whole fruits, grains, at least half of which are whole, fat-free or low-fat dairy, including milk, yogurt, cheese, or fortified soy products, a variety of protein foods, including seafood, lean meats, and poultry, eggs, legumes again, we see beans and peas, as well as nuts, seeds, and soy products. And then this last one is just oils. So in this next slide, we're going to kind of look at these recommendations a little more in depth so that I can take you through what these may mean, what they should mean, and why I don't necessarily agree with some of them, particularly in a gluten-free diet, but there's one of these that I just really don't agree with at all. And so we're going to talk about that. If I click to the next slide. Okay, so here is why this is problematic in theory, everything we've looked at so far. First of all, most of the nutrients in these recommendations are not exclusive to gluten-containing foods. For example, calcium is plentiful in vegetables as well as dairy, neither of which contain gluten. If you are a celiac disease person, then you may have issues with dairy, but if you can consume dairy and you can consume broccoli and other vegetables, calcium should not be a problem for you. Circling back again to iron, iron is found mostly in meat, which does not contain gluten unless it's a processed meat and it's using gluten as a filter or a filler. And while there are two types of iron, heme and non-heme iron, the second type is found in vegetables. It isn't traditionally found in these gluten-containing grains unless it's fortified with it. Fiber is found in nearly everything except animal products. And then zinc, B vitamins, and magnesium are also plentiful in multiple sources. So saying that eating a gluten-free diet puts you at risk for these nutrients, I really just have to disagree with, because if you're eating a whole foods, nutrient-dense diet, even if you don't include grains at all, not just the gluten grains, but even gluten-free grains, this is not going to be a problem. Furthermore, let's look back at those FDA guidelines. When it suggests that we have grains, at least half of which are whole, this can be problematic for someone who's trying to follow a gluten-free diet because it can expose a gluten intolerant or wheat allergic or celiac mama to react because of cross-contamination, which can be no joke, right? Fat-free or low-fat dairy. Let's just take a pause here for a second. There are two different types of vitamins. There are fat-soluble vitamins, which means they need fat to be absorbed into your body. And there are water-soluble vitamins, which means they just need water to absorb in your body. Fat-free and low-fat dairy has removed that fat, obviously, or lessened the fat, but the vitamins in dairy are the fat-soluble vitamins. So you're not actually able to absorb those vitamins without the fat. I always recommend full-fat dairy for myself and my clients, especially in pregnancy, because it really matters. The other issue with this recommendation is that it says fortified soy products. Soy is often paired with gluten as a filler, and soy is one of the top 8 allergens as well. The last thing that I take issue with from the FDA on this slide is where it just says oils. The very last recommendation they have was just oils. It didn't tell you anything about the quality of oils. It doesn't talk about those that are fit for consumption and those that aren't, those that should not be heated and those that should, those that require refrigeration and possibly like a dark green or brown bottle. And fats are super important in pregnancy. I will agree with the FDA on that. However, just saying oils does not go far enough. Okay, before we start part 2, in case anyone got here a little bit late, I just wanted to remind everyone to please put your questions into the chat box. That way I can get to them at the end of the presentation. I'm going to take a sip of water before we continue. So when I was introducing myself, I talked about the foundations of a healthy pregnancy and the foundations of nutrition. There are 6 of them. So we are going to dive into what those 6 are and what that means for you. Here's a fun little graphic from the NTA, the Nutritional Therapy Association. Optimal health is achieved when we build our diet on a properly prepared whole foods diet foundation, and we support that foundation with digestion, blood sugar regulation, mineral balance, fatty acid balance, and hydration. Here's what that means for you. Well-prepared, real food that packs a nutritional punch, proper absorption of that punch, and solid and consistent pooping. We will be talking about poop a little bit. I'm a nutritionist, can't get away from poop talk. You may not have come here expecting that, but it's also some of the things that we need to talk about when we're talking about troubleshooting issues in a pregnancy. It also means maintaining a steady supply of energy while you're growing this human. So we're talking about blood sugar regulation here, avoiding dizziness and gestational diabetes. We're also going to talk about getting enough fats to support you and baby, getting plenty of minerals to optimize wellness and recovery as we look to postpartum. And for hydration, we're going to talk about how you need a lot of water and you need all of the electrolytes as well. So here's where we get really nerdy, because we're going to really just dive in to all of the different nutrients that make up these foundations. And we're going to talk about the different ways you can get them. We're going to talk about what they do in your body and why they're important. So I hope you're ready to get nerdy with me, because I'm so excited to do it. Okay. Nutrient needs while pregnant are a lot like nutrient needs while not pregnant, except higher in almost everything, especially protein and fat, because you're growing human and that's hard work. And you need a lot to fuel your body, and you need a lot to fuel the synthesis of a human being out of very, very tiny cells from the beginning, right? So you're going to see an increased need in protein. You're going to need carbs to help sustain things. You're going to see an increased need in fat. And there's also an increased need in so many micronutrients, including vitamins and minerals. So we're going to dive into the specifics of all of these. And like I said, we're going to get really nerdy. So before we go into this next slide, I just want to tell you that I know this is a lot of information. This is meant more as a very, very quick deep dive overview. And I realize that quick and deep dive sounds a little bit oxymoronic. However, if you have any questions that I can't address at the end of this presentation due to time constraints or a question that comes up later, first of all, this is going to be recorded and you are going to be able to come back and watch it. Secondly, my contact information will be available to you at the very end, and so you will be able to reach out to me. And thirdly, there is a PDF goodie that you can download that has some of these tips in it as well. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Okay, let's do it. Macronutrients, okay? Now, I'm not typically a proponent of like counting your macros. A lot of times in a keto diet, you're gonna see that because you have to maintain these certain percentages. For this, macronutrients is not about keeping track of them necessarily. This is just about the big picture nutrients. So macro means big, micro means small. Macronutrients are the big categories of nutrients. So we've got protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So let's attack protein first. Why does protein matter? Is all protein created equally, and what are your best sources? So protein is absolutely essential for so many things, but especially in pregnancy. You are literally creating a human, again, from very small cells, and that requires a lot of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of every structure, particularly DNA, in our bodies. And so we have to have them in great number as we are building this body inside of our own. Amino acids are what protein is broken down into. And so the way we get these amino acids into our body is in the form of protein. All protein is not created equally. You can get protein from animals. You can get protein from plants. However, bioavailability is a huge, huge consideration here. I can eat 100 grams of meat or 100 grams of broccoli. One of those is going to be superior in terms of protein. And if you guessed broccoli, you are not correct. It's going to be meat. So our best sources of protein are going to be meat proteins. They're just easy for our body to digest them. They're easy for our body to utilize the nutrients that are in them. And with plants, we need a little bit more work. We need more enzymes in our body to do that. So it takes a little bit more time and it doesn't extract it as efficiently. I have heard the argument, and you may have heard the argument about protein that goes as follows. And I really just want to address this because it's extremely important to understand the way that we can utilize protein. So I've heard the argument that cows eat grass and turn the grass into protein, and then we eat cows for protein. which makes cows the middleman. And so we should just cut out the middleman and eat the grass, for example, or the vegetable, whatever. Okay, in this particular example, grass. Here's why that won't work. Cows and humans are not designed biologically the same. Cows have something called a rumen, so they can take those vegetable proteins and plant matter. They put it in their rumen. It sits in the rumen and ferments in the rumen. And then that fermentation is what allows them to utilize that into protein that their bodies can use. Human beings do not have a rumen. So we eat the animal that does have a rumen and we get the benefit of their rumen, but we don't have one. So that's one reason that meat is more biological or bioavailable to us in terms of protein content. So I will always recommend meat sources first. Eggs, fish and seafood as well are fantastic sources of protein. A lot of people will recommend nuts to you as protein, and while nuts have protein, they also have carbohydrates, but their highest macro is actually fat. So I don't consider meats or nuts and seeds to be a protein. I consider them to be a fat, and most holistic nutritionists that I know consider that the same way. Okay, so protein, best sources are going to be animal sources. If you are not going to be consuming animals, then your next best sources are going to be legumes. So the beans, the peas, the nuts, and the seeds. But generally speaking, when I work with a pregnancy client, I really want them to at least consider eating eggs. If you could eat dairy, that's also a really good source of protein. So a lacto-ovo vegetarian is going to be able to get a lot more of what they need bioavailably ready to absorb than a vegan in this particular case. Okay, moving on to our next macronutrient, carbohydrates. So today in carbs, we're going to talk about the difference between starchy carbs and non-starchy carbs, why carbohydrates matter, and where you can get them in your diet. This seems to be a sticking point in a gluten-free pregnancy, and it doesn't always make sense to me because carbs are not exclusive to gluten. Gluten itself is actually a protein, not a carb. It's just in a carb-containing food. So this always kind of throws me when people are like, well, I can't eat carbs because I can't eat gluten. Sure you can. So starchy carbs, we have grain forms that are gluten-free, but we also have non-grain forms. Starchy carbs are going to be things like potatoes of any variety. So red potatoes, golden potatoes, white potatoes, sweet potatoes, purple potatoes, white sweet potatoes, winter squashes. So your pumpkins, your acorn squashes, your butternut squashes, those are going to be your starchy carbs that are plant-based but not grain-based. Your grain-based ones that are gluten-free are going to be things like certified gluten-free oats. Now, oatmeal itself, oats are actually gluten-free. The difference is most of the time they're processed in such a way that cross-contamination is such an issue. So I fully recommend that you get gluten-free oats if gluten is a problem for you. Rice is gluten-free, quinoa and other ancient grains are also gluten-free. And so those would be your starchy carbs that are grain-based but gluten-free. For our non-starchy carbs, those are going to be other vegetables and fruits that don't have a lot of the carbs, right? So we're looking at berries, we're looking at dark leafy greens, we're looking at tomatoes, citrus fruits, things like that. Other cucumbers would also be non-starchy carbs. Other starchy carbs that would be fruits would be things like bananas, plantains, cassava. Why do carbs matter when you're pregnant? Well, carbs give us energy and fats give us energy too, but carbs are like quick burning kindling. So if you're starting a fire, you need kindling to get it started very quickly and start that burn, but then you need a log to make the fire last. The fats are the log and the carbs are the kindling. So the way that that translates into what we are talking about here today is that carbs help give us that energy. Carbs also help us feel better when we are feeling nauseous, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. But carbs really matter, especially in the first trimester, which is when we crave them most, right? Because of our thyroid. Your thyroid is extremely taxed while you're growing a human and creating a human, especially in the first trimester as our hormones are fluctuating. And starchy carbs help nourish that. Starchy carbs also give us more of a sustained energy. It feels a little bit longer. It lasts a little bit longer than our non-starchy carbs, but our non-starchy carbs are going to give us fiber. And we'll talk about the importance of fiber in pregnancy as well. So that's some of the reasons why carbohydrates matter, the difference between starchy and non-starchy carbs. And then we've also talked about the different food sources where you can get them in your diet. So these are going to be mostly plant-based items. They could also, well, they're all plant-based items, but what I mean is mostly whole foods, whole food plants. You could also get it in things like, if you're familiar with Siete Family Foods, they make cassava flour tortillas that are grain-free tortillas, but they are very starchy because they're made from cassava. Okay, moving on to our last macronutrient, fats. We're going to talk about how they help baby, how they help mama, the importance of balancing your omegas, and quality sourcing and proper use. Fats are so important that they're going to appear a couple of times throughout this slideshow. So firstly, fats help baby because baby's eyes and brain development depend upon them. It is very important that you're consuming fats while you're pregnant. Again, fats also give us that energy. So here's how they help mama. They also give us that energy, that sustained energy. It's going to be that log in the fire analogy. So it's going to last a lot longer than a carbohydrate. It's also going to help you combat brain fog, that pregnancy brain, which is very real. If you up your fat content, then you should start to see some of those effects mitigate. And then we're going to talk about omegas. So there are 3 different types of essential fatty acids. What essential means is that our body can't produce them on their own, so we have to consume them from the food that we eat. We have to get them that way. So the 3 omegas that we have are omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9. Omega-9 we don't hear quite as much about, but omega-3 and 9 tend to be anti-inflammatory, and omega-6s are pro-inflammatory. Now, inflammation is not always a bad thing. Out of control inflammation is a bad thing. But if you were to get cut, you need inflammation at the site of the cut so that you can get the scab that's going to stop your bleeding, right? So there's a time and a place for inflammation. Omega-6s are not bad oils. However, it is important that we balance them. Ideally, we should have a ratio of 1-to-1 between our omega-3s and our omega-6s, where we have 1 omega-3 for every omega-6. And if we were eating a whole foods diet with properly sourced foods, that would be a lot easier. However, in the standard American diet, we see that ratio at a lot higher. It's more like 1 omega-3 to every 22 omega-6s. And that's why we tend to see inflammation out of control. So I don't want to demonize any of these essential fatty acids because they are essential to life. We cannot make them on our own, but I do want to make sure that you're aware that your ratio needs to be in check. So we're going to talk about the quality, sourcing, and proper use of fats in some other slides. And I'm going to have some handouts on those slides that if you email me after this presentation, I would be more than happy to send you as well. But first, we're going to go through the micronutrients. So here's where we get really nerdy in the deep dive because we're going to go through all of the B vitamins and what they do in your pregnancy. And we're also going to talk about some of the other minerals and vitamins. Okay, a vitamin B complex is made up of all of the B vitamins and often nowadays choline as well. So we have vitamins B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B7, B9, B12, and choline. Choline is a B-like vitamin. It was just found much after the rest of the B vitamins were already found and named. So even though it's lumped here where it should be based on its characteristics, you won't see that it has its own vitamin B something or other. It's just called choline. So let's talk about the roles of these different B vitamins in your pregnancy. Vitamin B1, thiamine, helps with the formation of baby's brain, just like those essential fatty acids. Riboflavin, or vitamin B2, helps with baby eye development, just like those essential fatty acids, but it also makes mama's skin glow. Niacin and pantothenic acid, which are vitamins B3 and B5, assist in manufacturing hormones in the body. Now, this is going to be your body, which obviously there's an increased need for, but it's also going to be the hormones in baby's body. Pyroxidine, vitamin B6, develops the brain and nervous system for baby and can also help you, mama, with nausea. A lot of times vitamin B6 has been studied alongside some other things, and it's proven just as effective as ginger specifically. It has been studied with for treating morning sickness. So that is something to keep in your back pocket. If you are struggling with morning sickness, you can up your B6 and see how you're doing. Hyperemesis.org also recommends upping your B1 if you're dealing with morning sickness. Biotin is vitamin B7. It forms enzymes required to break down those macronutrients we just talked about, protein, carbs, and fats, which means you're going to absorb them because they have to be broken down in order to be absorbed. Folate, which is, I'm sure, one that you know, it's vitamin B9. It's crucial for several bodily processes and functions. It's also vital for the proper development of the neural tube, which turns into the spinal cord. And it does that pretty quickly in your pregnancy. So it's really crucial that if you're trying to conceive, you're consuming folate early on. The same is true for choline. The same is also true for cobalamin, which is vitamin B12, which are the next two on the list. But I'll just go ahead and tell you now that you should really be taking a prenatal that contains these things in it prior to conception, just so you can make sure you have enough of it. Folate is not the same thing as folic acid. They are similar, but folate is the naturally occurring vitamin B9 and folic acid is the synthetic. Anytime you are given a choice over natural or synthetic vitamins, you should always choose natural because your body's going to absorb it so much better. Also, when we're talking about specifically folate and cobalamin here, vitamin B12, all of the B vitamins really, but specifically these two, you really need to look at whether or not you have something called the MTHFR genetic mutation. It is a single nucleotide polymorphism, or a SNP, that means there's a difference in your genetic code that makes it difficult for you to metabolize B vitamins because you cannot methylate them on your own. So you need the methylated form. The methylated form is very bioavailable to everybody. So for cobalamin, the methylated form would be methylcobalamin versus cyanocobalamin, which is the form that many prenatals have. Cobalamin, again, is B12. This is involved in your energy metabolism, mama, as well as the neural tube. And then choline, that B-like vitamin, is crucial for baby's brain development as well. The good news is you can get folate and choline in egg yolks. So eat lots of eggs when you're pregnant, and you will be good to go. And when you're trying to conceive, eggs are a fantastic food as well. Other non-B vitamins that are of importance are vitamin C and vitamin D. So vitamin C, you probably know, is great for your immune system. You may not know that it's essential for healing. You cannot actually produce collagen without it, and it's essential for building your amniotic sac. If you take supplemental vitamin C, then it can make sure that your amniotic sac is stronger. If you are supplementing with vitamin C in pregnancy, you absolutely need to be working with a practitioner, whether it is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner or a registered dietitian, or someone in nutrition like myself, or your OBGYN or midwife. Dosing of vitamin C really matters in pregnancy, so don't try to do it yourself. Vitamin C also helps with iron absorption. It makes it that much more bioavailable. So that's fantastic. Vitamin D is actually not a vitamin. It's actually a hormone, and it's required for so many bodily processes. Now, before I continue into vitamin D, just because it's been a little bit since I've said this, I know that this is a lot of information. So again, as you come up with questions, please type them into the chat box so that I can make sure that I get to them and I answer them. Okay, so vitamin D, let's go back to that. Vitamin D is not super available in a lot of food sources. It is something that our body can process and make on its own, but we have to be giving the right circumstances for our body to make it. So the proper circumstances in order to make vitamin D are a minimum of 15 minutes of sun exposure, and it really needs to be exposed to your whole body. So ideally, you would be in a bathing suit every day, without sunscreen 15 to 20 minutes outside every day just to synthesize this vitamin D. That's not necessarily something that is going to be very practical, especially as we are moving into the fall and winter seasons, the colder months right now. The sun gets less shiny during the day during these months, so we're exposed even less during these months. Because skin cancer is an issue, we are slathering ourselves in SPF, which is fantastic to protect against skin cancer. However, those rays are what we actually need to tell our body to manufacture vitamin D. So I always recommend to my pregnant clients that they supplement with vitamin D. Again, if you are interested in supplementing with vitamin D, you should check with your provider for dosage just to make sure. Vitamin D is improved. The absorption of it from a supplement is improved when you pair it with vitamin K, particularly vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. These are part of those fat-soluble vitamins I was talking about earlier. So you need to take them with a fat if you're going to hope to absorb them. Because if you just take them with a glass of water, you won't actually be absorbing it. So now we're moving on to the last of our micronutrients, minerals. These are minerals of importance in pregnancy. Calcium. Calcium is essential for bone and teeth formation, as well as blood health and hydration. So this is really important for you in terms of hydration and blood health. And it's really important for your baby as he or she forms his bones and teeth. Calcium and iron are going to compete and block one another's absorption. So you're going to want to take them away from one another. Iodine is essential for your thyroid health, but also your baby's thyroid health. You can get iodine from seaweed. You can take it supplementally with little drops. You can also get it from seafood. Magnesium is my favorite mineral, personally. I like to call it nature's chill pill because it helps you rest. It assists in muscle cramps, it can alleviate nausea, and it can help with your mood. It, like calcium, is also a factor in hydration. It's one of the electrolytes like calcium is. You can get magnesium in dark chocolate, limes, lemons, avocados, and dark leafy green vegetables. Zinc is a mineral that plays an essential role in baby's cellular and DNA formation. Zinc and copper are going to compete for one another. So if you have those together in your prenatal, you may want to talk to your provider about making sure that your levels are adequate in pregnancy. So iron. I've talked about iron several times already in this presentation. Again, you're using so much of it for baby. Your placenta is using it. Baby is building their own blood. You are also, again, 50% more blood volume in your body. So you're using a ton of it. Do's and don'ts for iron, like I said, you do not want to consume it alongside calcium because it's going to block that absorption. In one of my pregnancies, I had anemia, and it was just pregnancy-related anemia because I wasn't replacing it enough. However, I thought that the solution would be to cook some beef in some cast iron along with some broccoli. Beef and broccoli is one of my favorite things to cook because it's very easy. You throw it into one pan, it's great. My levels didn't change even eating that multiple times per week. And the reason that they didn't is because calcium is one of the highest food, or broccoli is one of the highest foods containing calcium. So they were actually counteracting one another. So it didn't matter that I had beef that was high in iron. It didn't matter that I was cooking in cast iron because I was blocking it with the calcium. So you don't want to do that. What you do want to do is take your iron alongside vitamin C. Vitamin C has the opposite effect of calcium. Vitamin C actually ups that absorption rate of iron. So that's definitely what you want to do, especially if you're going to go into non-heme iron. And so that's what we're going to talk about next, are the two different types of iron. Heme iron comes from an animal. We have beef, organ meat, especially the spleen and liver, and oysters are going to be your best sources. And then non-heme comes from plants, lentils, dried apricots, beans, spinach, and dark chocolate. Okay, this is a beautiful pregnancy smorgasbord. It's very balanced. We've got the non-starchy vegetables over here with our leafy greens and our broccoli. We have non-starchy fruits with the citrus. In the blueberries, we have this beautiful fat and magnesium containing avocado. We have nuts, we have gluten-free oats, we have fish. Like, this is a very balanced diet. We're going to talk about food sourcing and food storage. Meats should be grass-fed, grass-finished, or wild-caught, or pastured. Eggs should also be pastured. Here's the rationale. These animals are free to roam around and eat as they would have eaten in the wild, which means they are going to have higher vitamin D. They're going to have a better ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s in their own meat because of how they're raised. Dairy should also be grass-fed, grass-finished, and again, full fat, so you can actually absorb those vitamins. Oils and fats are going to have their own slides. I know I said that earlier. It's that important. Your plants, fruits, and vegetables should be organic per the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So we're going to look at those. So going back to oils, canola oil, margarine, and other vegetable oils, while often touted as heart healthy, are actually not, and they're not the best routes to go. I hardly ever have never foods that I talk about with my clients. Canola oil and margarine are never foods for me. Instead, you should go with healthy fats like organic and grass-fed butter or ghee, wild-caught salmon or small fatty fish like sardines, mackerel, things like that that come canned, nuts and nut butters, coconut products, coconut manna, which is also called coconut butter, coconut oil and coconut meat, the actual coconut, avocado and avocado oil, olives and olive oil. These last three, coconut, avocado, and olives, should be expeller pressed so that you're getting the most nutrient density out of it. Really quickly, just to go back to that top, the oils that I say are not the best routes to go. They're not the best routes because they rancidify very easily. They're prone to oxidation from light and from heat. They're also they're damaged when they're extracted because of high heat. They're stored in clear containers most of the time. And that causes them to go rancid. It causes them to oxidize. So when you get them in your body, they actually cause free radicals to be unleashed upon your cells. You don't want that. I didn't tell you back in the fat slide, which is so important, and I'm so sorry that I missed it, but fats are essential for your cellular structure. All cell membranes are made up of cholesterol. And so you absolutely have to make sure that you are getting these quality fats into your body so that your cells are strong. Also, all of our reproductive hormones are made from cholesterol as well. So if your hormones are made out of less than stellar oils, if your cells are made out of less than stellar oils, then you're actually not giving yourself the best foot forward and you're not giving your baby the best start. This is one of the handouts I will be more than happy to send you. It goes over which fats are safest for cooking, which fats you can cook, but you're not going to want to really bake or fry, oils that can be used but should not be used for cooking, and then the ones that are unsafe that you should not consume, again, because they're prone to rancidation. This is from the Nutritional Therapy Association as well. So please email me after this, and I will be more than happy to send this your way. The Environmental Working Group every year surveys crops, and the top 12 crops with the most pesticide residue becomes their Dirty Dozen list. So these are their Dirty Dozen. These are the ones you should always buy organic just to reduce your toxic exposure. They also make a list of the cleanest 15. So it's called the Clean 15. These are the ones that you do not have to worry about buying organic because they have a lot less residue. They have almost zero residue on them, which is fantastic, especially for your budget. Okay. You want to avoid when you're storing foods, especially if you're looking ahead to postpartum and you're trying to meal prep ahead of time, you want to avoid hormone disrupting storage, which essentially is just anything that has something called a xenoestrogen in it. That's a chemical compound that mimics estrogen. You don't want to add this into your body, especially postpartum when your hormones are trying to adjust, especially in pregnancy when your hormones are already ramped up. So really you want to avoid plastic and you want to avoid cooking with things like Teflon, using anything that's nonstick unless it's ceramic. So what to use instead? You want to cook in cast iron, stainless steel, ceramic, things like that. You want to store in glass or food grade silicone. Part 5 is going to lead us to our last section, troubleshooting foundational issues in your pregnancy. These are common pregnancy complaints. like heartburn. In pregnancy, heartburn is caused by a few things. One is going to be the increased levels of progesterone in your body. This slows down digestion and is actually going to be a culprit for several of these pregnancy complications. It just is what it is. It slows things down. It relaxes things a little bit. So valves that should be closed are not closed, particularly in this case, the valve between your esophagus and your stomach, which is what allows that stomach acid to come back up into your esophagus. The other reason that you might be having that same issue that isn't related to progesterone is actually related to your stomach acid pH. Your stomach acid pH needs to be extremely acidic. If it is too basic, too alkaline, then your sphincter is not going to get the message that it needs to be closed as well. So ways to treat it, you can supplement with hydrochloric acid before meals or with meals. You can also take a shot of apple cider vinegar in your water about 15 to 30 minutes prior to meals, or you can put lemon juice in your water 30 minutes prior to meals and see if that helps mitigate it. That should cause those stomach acids to start churning a little bit. Treatments to avoid and why would be Tums, which I know is like every pregnant woman stereotypically has Tums by her bed. Tums will relieve the actual pain in the esophagus, but in the long run, things like that are calcium, very, very, very basic, are going to exacerbate the problem of raising that pH in your stomach when really you want it to be lowered. So that's why you want to avoid those. This is a chart of poop. Yes, this is called the Bristol stool chart. Okay, constipation is a huge issue in pregnancy. Reasons why are, again, progesterone slowing things down. Also, we have such an increased need for hydration, and we are not always meeting it. Complications from constipation, in addition to being impacted and very uncomfortable, are hemorrhoids and varicose veins. So treatments are really just to up your fiber, chia seeds, dark green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds can help with this as well, and to up your intake of water and hydration. So not just water, but also minerals. If you're looking at the poop chart, the Bristol stool chart, the number 4 is what a normal poop looks like. Anything underneath 4, so 5, 6, and 7 is considered on its way to or diarrhea. Anything above it, 1, 2, and 3, is going to be either constipation or on its way to constipation. So if you would like a copy of this, I can send you that one as well. Morning sickness is still considered by and large a medical mystery. Some people think that it's actually a reaction of the thyroid having sufficient iodine. Some people think that it's a holdover from when we were trying not to eat things that would harm us while pregnancy. And some people think that there's a genetic component to it. We just actually don't know. So supporting your digestion with eating smaller meals, smoothies, which are extreme, and soups, they're extremely great on your, very easy on your digestion. Very easy because they're already cooked very, very well, so they're easier to break down, things like that. Supporting your liver with dark leafy green vegetables, trying to stay hydrated, all of these are going to help. Hyperemesis gravidarum is a very serious condition of morning sickness. If you're not able to keep water down, reach out to your provider about whether or not you have HG, because sometimes it requires hospitalization and medicine. A lot of times for morning sickness, we're asked to eat toast and things like that that do contain gluten. So if you are gluten-free but eating gluten-free grains, I fully recommend Canyon Bakehouse bread. That's the kind we keep in my house. Incidentally, they are actually sponsoring all of these classroom sessions, but they're not sponsoring me. I absolutely love their products though, and we buy it all the time. We get ours at Target. If you are not eating grains, then go for those starchy carbs because that should help. Balancing your blood sugar is going to help as well. When you are hungry, you can get nauseous. There is a blood sugar roller coaster that we want to avoid, where you eat something carby that is starchy and by itself, and so you feel full, and then you starve. And then you get tired, so you drink some coffee, and then you go up and down through this throughout the day. Ways to mitigate this are to have, here's that mantra I promised you, no naked carbs. Always pair a carbohydrate with a fat, like you see here, or a protein, like you see here. Make sure that you're extremely protective of your sleep as much as you can be. Get as many hours of sleep as you can, especially 7 to 8. Keep your caffeine in check. You don't want more than 2 cups of coffee per day. If you do these things and your blood sugar is in check, then gestational diabetes should not be an issue. Dehydration can also lead to nausea. Chances are you've heard one of 2 formulas, that you either need to drink half your body weight in water, or you need to drink 8 8-ounce glasses a day, so 64 ounces a day. Half your body weight in water is a really, really great formula to start with. In pregnancy, you need about 24 additional ounces of water. Diuretics like coffee, tea, juices are going to pull some of that liquid from your cells. So you want to make sure that you replace it. For every 8 ounces of coffee, for example, you're going to want to drink 12 ounces of water. Electrolytes matter. You can get this in trace minerals. This helps you absorb the water better. So trace minerals are things like magnesium, potassium, calcium. Bicarbonate is actually an electrolyte as well. You can get this by putting sea salt in your water, by actually buying trace minerals, or by putting something like lemon juice or lime juice in your water as well. You don't need to do that for every cup of water, but every other cup really does matter. Again, hydration matters because of your blood volume increase. It also matters since digestion is slowed. It's going to help you counteract that whole constipation effect as well. Some books for further study, if you're into self-studying and you want to study, are Real Food for Pregnancy by Lily Nichols, The Mama Natural Week by Week Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth by Genevieve Howland, and The Whole Pregnancy by Amy Aristelios. This last book is very whole foods based, as you can assume from the title, but it's also specifically for gluten-free mamas. So that's a pretty fantastic resource. And of course, I am also a resource. Here's where you can find me. I'm at nourishandnurturewellness.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram also at Nourish and Nurture Wellness. I also have a booth here where you can find me at Nourish and Nurture Wellness. And I would be super happy to talk to you. So again, here's my website. My email address is just nourishandnurturewellness@gmail.com. And that is actually on my booth as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for right now so that I can go ahead and get into the chat and answer those questions. Okay, hi, it's me. Any questions in the chat that you guys have for me? I know that was so much information. Thank you so much for being here, though. I'm so excited to talk about this and to geek out with you guys about pregnancy and about pregnancy nutrition. Pregnancy nutrition and prenatal nutrition are my absolute favorite things to talk about. You can ask anybody. I'll just give it a few seconds for questions. I know that there's a slight delay between what you hear me say and what I'm able to see. So I'm just going to give it a few more seconds on that one. And actually, I'm going to type my email address into the chat. You should be able to see that in the chat. Just waiting for some questions to come through. If you've typed questions into the question box, I'm actually not seeing any right now. So maybe if you had a question, retype it for me so that I can see that, please. Just checking to see if I have any questions here. I have it pulled up on another screen as well. Nope, doesn't look like it. Okay, well, that was a lot of information. I know. Again, they are going to put up this recording, so you are going to be able to come back and access this talk again. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at nourishandnurturewellness@gmail.com. You can head to my website, nourishandnurturewellness.com. You can find me again on Instagram and Facebook at Nourish and Nurture Wellness, and I would be more than happy to address any questions that you have that way as well. Don't forget to go to my booth and click on your free goodie. It's got some tips, tricks, and suggestions, I guess we'll say, for your gluten-free pregnancy. And I am just so excited that you guys were here today. I'm getting some messages that the chat may not be working. That is unfortunate because I'm sure you have questions and I would really, really like to answer them. Please reach out to me with your questions. I would be more than happy to answer them. I'm sorry that the question box is not working. Thank you for your patience as well. This is one of the first sessions at the first ever online Nourish Festival. So there are probably some kinks that we need to work through, but I'm so glad that you were here. I don't know if you're able to see my email address on there again. You know what, I'll just share my screen one more time and let you guys have that. Hold on one second, bear with me. Okay. And then you know what, I'm actually gonna exit this presentation and just put my email address in here as well. That way you can take a screenshot or a picture. That way you've got it. Okay. I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so you can see that all at once. We'll do it like that. Okay, now we'll present. There you go. So I'm sorry that it worked out this way and I wasn't able to answer your questions. Please, please, please take a picture of this. You can find me at any of these locations. And please reach out. I am more than happy to be a resource to help answer this question or any questions for you. Again, you can get this information directly at my booth, and you can also access that goodie, that PDF. It's just a really quick one-page download of some tips for your pregnancy. So one more time, in case you don't see this, I'm gonna go ahead and say it one more time for you guys. You can find me at nourishandnurturewellness.com. You can email me, nourishandnurturewellness@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Nourish and Nurture Wellness. And just in case that's a mouthful for you and you're having a hard time, I'm just gonna spell it out for you. It's NOURISANDNURTUREWELLNESS Again, I'm so sorry that you were not able to get to me in the chat. But thank you so much for coming to this one. I am so excited. I saw a lot of people sign up for this. I'm going to give you back my face now. Hold on one second. There we go. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to answer your questions. Please do reach out to me. And thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful day at the Online Nourish Festival. I hope to see you around in some of our other sessions that we have. Thank you so much.